Do we have some news for you tonight? Washington's still buzzing about the appointment of former FBI head Robert Mueller as special counsel for the Russia investigation. It looks like he's going to have a whole lot to look into as the developments are coming fast and furious. And President Trump, never one to go quietly into the good night, fighting back, calling the probe, in his words, a witch hunt and bad for the country. Where do we go from here? Also, Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney joins us, and the New York Democrat, he's going to weigh in on the Russia probe and much more. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you for joining us for a very busy Thursday. Once again, a White House in crisis mode. Last night, news broke right before we went to air that former FBI head Robert Mueller was being appointed special counsel in the Russia investigation. President Trump, he was quiet last night, but that didn't last long. This morning, the tweet storm began. This is the single greatest witch hunt of a politician in American history. Of course, his words. Then, during a closed lunch with news anchors today, he reportedly said this investigation, quote, hurts our country terribly. Then, during a joint news conference with the Colombian president just an hour or so ago, he doubled down on all of it. Take a listen for yourself.
The entire thing has been a witch hunt, and there is no collusion between certainly myself and my campaign, but I can always speak for myself and the Russians, zero. I think it divides the country. I think we have a very divided country.
Then he flat out denied he even tried to get fired FBI Director James Comey to drop the probe.
In the light of a very busy news week, a lot of people would like to get to the bottom of a couple of things, give you a chance to go on record here. Did you at any time urge former FBI Director James Comey in any way, shape, or form to close or to back down the investigation into Michael Flynn? And also, as you look back...
No. Next question.
Now, just minutes before that joint news conference, Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill, she came out of a briefing with the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, and broke this news. It's so big, she was asked twice to say it. Take a listen for yourself.
He did acknowledge that he learned Comey would be removed prior to him writing his memo.
Say that again? He what?
He knew that Comey was going to be removed prior to him writing his memo.
So to be clear, that clearly contradicts the initial and even secondary White House claims that a recommendation from Rosenstein prompted the firings. Also today, President Trump said they're close to picking a replacement for Comey to head the FBI, and the name we're hearing most, former Connecticut Senator Joe Lieberman. Lieberman was Democrat turned independent, headed up the Homeland Security Committee, and this is just the tip of what is a very busy day today. Let's introduce our panel to hash it all out. Richard Brodsky.
Asher number one.
Yes, in the colorful shirt here. Former Democratic New York State Assemblyman, now senior fellow at Demos, professor at NYU, Beau Brummel. Bill O'Reilly, former Republican strategist, now a member of the Conservative Party. Thank you for getting the memo, Bill. And Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. Ditto to you as well. Listen. We've literally changed the rundown four times today, and it's the norm. People laugh at me for trying to put something together in 10, given this administration and all the developments. I'll talk later with Congressman Maloney, but I think what we're going to hear is that he, like many, likes the selection of Bob Mueller. They believe he's a man of both integrity, experience. He'll have both the materials and the non-interference, one would believe, from the White House, and he wouldn't tolerate it if it came down. So that will go down that track, but it looks like it's going to be a criminal investigation.
It is a criminal investigation. What's interesting, though, is the scope of the investigation, and that's where I think you're going to find both problems and opportunities. As with other special counsel, he has the right to go to things that are related to. So if you'll remember, Kenneth Starr, he started on an Arkansas Whitewater deal. It ended up with Monica Lewinsky. Well, the problem for the Trump people is that when people are contacted and asked questions, and when tax returns are examined, and when financial disclosure statements are made, who knows what's going to pop up? So the problem for the Trump people is, in the long run, this creates tremendous uncertainty about how nutty they are.
In terms of the investigations, this concurrent investigation, you've got the House and the Senate, multiple agencies doing investigation, the FBI doing an investigation. Do they get conflated? Do they have to pick their lanes? How does this work?
It gets very complicated. If you remember back to the Ollie North investigations, Ollie North was eventually convicted of the crime of lying to the grand jury, but it was reversed on appeal because his testimony before the congressional committees gave him immunity. You have the possibility of intentionally or unintentionally the congressional investigations interfering with the Mueller investigation. You have the question of leaks. I doubt there'll be much coming out of the Mueller operation, but like with today, members of the Congress have a different public responsibility.
But to be clear, the power of, in this case, independent counsel, and I know there's distinctions with differences, but for practical purposes, he's got a lot more subpoena power and authority than the congressional committees do, and also he has a different job.
And he has better staff. So the real investigation will go forward, but a congressional investigation has the advantage of keeping the people of the country involved in the process as it's going on. In short run, this is very good for Trump. It's going to take the focus off the insanity, the serial nuttiness that you've seen in the last week.
But
in the
Andrew,
run,
though,
The special counsel will be able to focus in on the criminal activities, but the investigations and the hearings and the committees in the House and the Senate will focus on other stuff too. So stuff that falls short of criminal indictability, those committees can still investigate, can still uncover, and still take political action, which would be down the impeachment path potentially.
before I get to the politics with Bill, Richard said what some have said, which is, first of all, this investigation of Mueller is going to take a long time. This isn't going to be wrapped up in a week or two. I think the trigger date for a lot of people to be interested is, does it finish before next November, which is obviously the midterms. Leaving that aside for a minute, the president certainly didn't treat the revelations that this was good news. He learned with all of 25 minutes beforehand that Rosenstein was going with Mueller here, and apparently he was livid by the answer. Not initially, but as we've seen in the tweets, et cetera, and the sour mood today, because he doesn't know where this ends.
Right.
And in fact, his answer was very interesting. We didn't show it there, where he said, I can speak for myself. That I was not involved with any collusion with Russia. Couldn't speak for basically his campaign.
That's a bit of a slip.
Distinction with a difference.
That's a bit of a slip for him too. Up until now, it had all been no Russia connection. There's no story there. It's all fake news. It's all fake news. This is really for the first time that he's saying, it's possible that there are people in my campaign who are colluding with the Russians, but I certainly didn't know anything about it, which is sort of setting the stage for a defense to try to keep his job if and when it's discovered that there in fact were collusionary activities between the campaign and
we're going to get into Russia because there's so many developments on that front here and a lot of tangential stuff that may or may not be connected. But Bill, Republicans have been in this contorted kabuki dance as to what do, how far do they run away from the president, how far can they run away from the president. They like his agenda, they want to do it, but at what political cost here? They're looking at Montana, they're looking at Georgia with their special elections we were talking about yesterday that could be canaries in the coal mine or not. Does this finally let them exhale, or do they say, wait a minute, we got an independent prosecutor where we have no idea where this could lead?
Yeah.
Are they exhaling or are they, groaning right now?
First, I just want to note that Mueller's had the best 24 hours of publicity in history. He's like the second coming of somebody.
For Republicans,
everybody is just
is a miracle.
people are falling down in the press to say great things about Mueller. Second thing is Republicans are in a no-win situation. They cannot win here because the Trump base doesn't believe that any of this is true. The Trump base genuinely believes that the Russia investigation is a fabrication from the news media.
A witch hunt, just like the president.
They but genuinely believe that. So the Republicans can't pull away from Trump en masse yet. They can't do that. The case needs to get laid out. And that's not the way the special counsel is going to work. It's going to be lots of time of silence. Richard's right that the House and Senate investigation will kick some material up, but the Republicans are stuck. This is why we talked last year about the existential threat to the party. They can't go either way.
Just to explain the dynamics that Bill's talking about is, if you're a Republican, you may say to yourself, all right, if it's just a general I'm worried about here, I can create some distance and daylight between me and the president. But they got to worry about a primary. And as everybody learned in the Tea Party waves that came before it, you go against the base that's there, that may be enough to derail you come primary
But even
time.
for general elections, if that base doesn't show up in a lot of districts, unless you're in a very Republican district, you're in jeopardy of losing. So it's a really tough
Isn't
spot.
a real problem for Republicans now that the Russia stuff and is sort of institutionalized? What's next? The problem with
unknown.
this president is
Yeah.
it's something. If the history is a guide, something else is going to pop.
I
All
think.
right.
Oh, go ahead.
And I'm sorry, I just got to jump a break here because there's a lot we got to get to, including more news here. Yet more revelations about Trump, his campaigns, ties to Russia, monies, meetings, more. Trust me, you haven't heard all of it. We're going to try and boil it all down to you right after this.